Hello, 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 hello. All right, I think we're live. Yep. Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to the stream. Good evening. Thanks for stopping by. Hey Taylor, how you guys going? Perfect. So chat's working, video working, audio working. Excellent. All right, we can get straight into today's session. So for those of you who weren't here last time, we started working on this guy, this mecha robot. A lot of things have changed since we originally started with this. Like I have changed a lot of things. So if you're curious about like the design and the thinking process behind this guy, you can watch the previous stream. So what I thought we do today is just continue the refinement of this guy. But before I actually do that, I'm going to show you something that I did kind of like off camera, because there are a few things that I think. Let me actually bring in my Epic pen. There are a few things that I think are a little bit too cliche or too obvious for these type of things. So I want to avoid that, and that's part of the process of designing. Sometimes you just do the first thing that comes to your mind, then you really think about it, and it's like maybe not do that. So basically, this thing right in the middle is I don't know. I've seen it many times. That's why probably I went straight for that, just as an easy workaround. So I'm gonna get rid of that. This area right here as well. I'm gonna change the idea a little bit as well. So I'm gonna get rid of that. And that's part of the design process, and that's what I like to keep everything super sketchy, very loose, until I'm really happy with the overall idea and what I'm going for. So I change things quite a bit, especially with hard surface modeling, because that's again not my I wouldn't say that's my forte. So when I do it, because I enjoy doing hard surface, I try to change things quite a bit. Aside from that, there are a few things that they read a little bit weird. So for example, this line here, it just reads like like a happy face, like a happy smile, and that sort of thing. So those are the things that I wanna change, and I did change them. So let me just show you the alternative. So I just started playing around with different shapes, and all I did really was use the move elastic, which I explained last stream. It's just another move brush, but it allows you to it creates this elastic effect, so it doesn't you don't have a lot of control over how you change things. So it's very good to explore shapes and exaggerate things. So I think this one is a little bit more interesting, at least a bit more original than this one. So I'm gonna scrap this all together and just work on this one. So all I did really was just change the head and a bit of proportions here in the body. So if I switch between the two, actually let me just dock this one here on the left hand side, do a snapshot of that, and bring in the other. So I just want to show you what I did before, like after the stream last time, and then what I will do today. Yeah, so I took this thing and duplicated it and sent it to this area. So I have two sort of like I don't know exactly what this could be. We'll think about it as we go. So I just moved that here and duplicated, so mirrored and weld. This thing, I just left it where it is. I just shrinked it down and rotated a little bit to make it more interesting. And then the rest is just to change some of the lines, the visual cuts or the paneling. So instead of having these two sort of like main shapes now, what I've done is just break it down in a few more and just make them a bit more interesting. We'll still need to refine these, but that is the idea. All right. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and clear the canvas. Clear the canvas. There we go. So I'm just going to use the move brush with the AccuCurve, make sure that I have my symmetry enabled, and I'm just going to refine some of these shapes that I didn't really spend too much time refining. I just literally took the move elastic brush and start pulling and pushing things until I found something mildly interesting that I can refine. But yeah, I think that's, I mean, the primary shape at least is a little bit more interesting. And of course, we haven't even got to the detail stage. So all of those areas would look definitely more interesting. And this is still a dynamesh, so I can change things very quickly. I'm not attached to that design by any means. All right. By the way, guys, if you have any questions about this process or about anything else like this is part of what I do these streams, just to answer any questions that you might have. And if obviously if they're relevant to what I'm doing, it's much easier. But if you have questions about something else completely different, I'll try to talk about those things or try to answer the question as I work. It will be a little bit if you've been in my streams before, you might notice that I try to talk a lot and I tend to branch out, and sometimes what I say doesn't make much sense, but I'll be happy to answer any questions that you guys have. All right. I think that's looking good. What I can do now is bring in my damp standard brush, and I can just redefine some of these paneling and these areas a little bit more. So this is going to be just a series of cuts using the normal or the standard effect of the damp standard brush, and then using the Alt key just to invert the effect, I just sharpen those borders like so. That's pretty much it. So just a lot of that to refine these shapes. And again, part of this process is I would say is design, or like thinking about the design and how things work and how these potential panels will interlock with each other. But it's also a bit technical in the it's not as technical as other processes, because again, this is still a sketch. So as you can see, the difference between this and what we had before from last stream is definitely a different style or a different design. So like as you do this and as you start like fixing things around and you look at the character, the mecha from all these angles, then you start to look different things. So for example, right now what I can see is just another suggestion for the eyes here. So he looks like a sad like a sad guy. So I don't want these type of things. I don't want to fall into these shapes that would read as kind of like a face, because it's meant to be a robot rather than like a suit or a helmet that a human is wearing. So for that, I can just go ahead and refine this a bit better, or like change some things, just so that it doesn't read as a pair of eyes, really. So I'm just smoothing this one. And just trying a different sort of paneling effect. And this is the type of things that I spend a lot of time doing, just making sure that they kind of work. I'm going to bring in my clay brush, and I'm just going to fill these gaps a bit. So this area still reads like the eyes, but that's just kind of like an unavoidable thing, since we are very prompt to recognize faces or see faces where there really no faces. So I'm just trying to take advantage of that now. So things will change constantly. especially if you're designing, if you're not following a specific thing. At least for me, I just change things a lot along the way. So again, just using the damp standard brush to fill in those gaps. I can use the move brush as well with the AccuCurve so that we get a very sharp edge, and then just start pulling and pushing things. And I use this as a quick refinement of the edges, just to make that a little bit sharper. And again, this is still a dynamesh, so I can just redynamesh at any time and distribute the topology a bit better. And of course, with the clay brush, we can fill in some of these gaps here, because when you use the damp standard, like the inverted effect, it creates kind of like a inverted crevices, obviously. So just using the clay brush, you can fill in those gaps so it feels a bit more solid. And the smooth brush. That's the whole process here. As I designed this, that's pretty much all I use. At this stage, I don't use any custom brushes, any alphas or anything like that. That would come later. Just the standard brushes and the ones that I have here in my custom UI, the essential brushes. You'll see they're pretty much all of them come with ZBrush. I just have a couple of custom ones, but they're very, very simple, based on some of the the clay brushes, the standard brushes, and that sort of thing. So I don't use any brush outside of these ones when I'm at this stage. So when I'm designing. When I move on to the refinement stage and adding details, that's when I start using custom brushes and alphas and that sort of thing. But for the time being, it's fine. I think I'm going to push this a little bit higher, or like create another effect here, another paneling. So I'm going to use the mask lasso to mask an area. All right, from this side, just cover this, protect this area here. Yeah, something like that. And then using the move brush, let's see how this looks. I'm not a fan of this area here, so I'm just gonna go ahead and change it again, just with the clay brush. I don't mind this part in here, but here is not great. So maybe I'm just gonna integrate this part of the top of the helmet. Let's call it a helmet, although it's not a helmet, but the top of the head. I'm gonna integrate it a bit better here. And then just damp stand the brush again. And another thing that I like to pay attention to when I'm defining these panels, again, I know that I've changed it quite a bit, is it's basically two things: the way that they look and how they look with it, like in combination with each other. So one panel, how it looks in combination with the other one, and if the lines actually help to define them a little bit better. And the second thing is, trying to keep an eye on the balance. So how many of these lines are closer together. So for instance, right now, again, this area looks kind of like the eyes of the guy, but actually I don't mind them right now. But if I start adding all of these lines and do a bunch of lines like this just to add panels for the sake of adding, then all this area becomes too crowded and a bit hard to read and to focus on something specific. So I also keep an eye on that, making sure that if I'm going to add some panels, I'm just doing them in a specific area, let's say around there and maybe around here, but I still have these two pieces of the main primary shape that have areas of rest. That's that's also how you might be familiar with those terms, areas of rest and areas of details. Let me have a look at the chat, see what's up. Is that little color model on the upper right a new feature in ZBrush or a plugin? No, it's a new feature. It's just a custom cam view. It's called the cam view. This one here. It's just you can customize it whatever you want. I actually did change it last stream. The press robots from Hitchhiker Guide. Yeah, that's exactly right. ¿Cuál es tu método para hacer tu topología surface para animación? So I don't do much retopology for animation in hard surface. I rarely, although there are certain things or certain times that I do the full production, as in from concept and idea all the way to retopology and retopology that could be used in animation. That's something that I prefer not to do, not only because I find it a little bit boring, but because yeah, sometimes someone else is much better than me doing that. So sometimes it's better to pick your battles. So I don't have any like specific tips on retopology. There are many different ways to approach the polishing, for example, of this guy of hard surface and creating topology for animation. It's just that I don't necessarily do that often. I sort of stay within the concept stage or the concept sculpt for as long as I can. And if I have to, if it's for a client, and if I have to do something for animation, I either find someone that can do it for me faster and much better, or if I have to do it again, there's many different ways. That doesn't answer your question, I know, but hopefully when we get to polish these guys, I can show you some tricks. I'm not gonna do this for animation, obviously, so I'm not gonna create a perfect topology, but there are different ways. You can use the topology brush to very quickly create parts of topology that have a clean and decent set of loops, or you can use the Zero Mesher, the new Zero Mesher 3.0, I think it is. The new algorithm for hard surface is outstanding, and you can just define your polygroups, and that's another way to do it. So it's really depend on, I don't know, what you feel more comfortable with. I find it hard to sort of have a single type of, or a single workflow, a single tool to do the same thing. I tend to try different things. If something works better for one project, I stick with that. If another thing works a bit better for another one, then I just move to the next thing, and so on and so forth. So that's that. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's what I would do. Just depending on the project, I will tackle the retopology differently. I mean, the retopology tools in ZBrush are pretty awesome, but again, if you feel more comfortable in a different software, you probably want to do it there. I myself just find the retopology tools using the C-spheres in ZBrush very easy intuitively, and because I'm very comfortable with ZBrush, I just do it in there. And then of course we can use the C modeler to refine some of the topology, or you can use again another software. That's part of the deal. I'm just thinking how to connect these two panels here. So I might just open a little gap here. But I don't want it to have, I'm just trying to figure out a way to avoid the sad eyes from the hitchhiker's robot. I'm just gonna bring in my move brush, AccuCurve, and just push this down or up. And of course, I think this is the one. This is the problem. Again, change it again. I'm gonna have to choose something quickly and stick with it, because otherwise we'll be here doing this for a long time. So I'm gonna try to keep it simple, or keep the design process in check, because again, I tend to spend a lot of time doing this, and since there is no time pressure other than, you know, the duration of the stream, but there's no client or deadline for this, I'm not too worried about it. So I'm gonna try to give myself a little bit of a deadline so that I can, you know, define this a bit better, and or like stick with a design, because I've changed it quite a bit. All right, now that looks like a frog. Just with the clay brush right now, I'm redefining some of the volumes that I crushed with the move elastic. So I just want to make sure I redefine those. And I'll check the chat in just a second. I know that there's some questions in there. Just gonna do something drastic here. Yep, I like that better. I'm going back to that idea where we started actually, which is kind of like a beluga whale, the head of a beluga whale. So if you look at it from the profile, it's very simple shape. So we'll have to break that silhouette apart a little bit, and I'm gonna just do that with this idea, sort of like this forehead protruding a little bit more. I'm gonna redynamesh and redefine this again. So yeah, a lot of changes as we go, but again, that's it. That's something that I personally really enjoy. You know, figuring out, sort of like playing tricks on myself. As in, I start designing something and it's like, oh yeah, this is really cool, and then I look at it from the distance. It's like, what am I doing? This is not working at all. And that's I like that process, that idea of, you know, you think you're comfortable with what you just did, and then it's like, nope, that's not it. But being aware of that, and being able to, you know, to sort of self assess your own process and your own design ideas, I think that's a good thing. So I don't necessarily get frustrated. I try to get better at it, if that makes any sense. But all these processes pretty much the same thing. Probably could do some paneling here. All right, I think I'm starting to like this idea of this piece sort of like overlapping a little bit. So I'm just gonna inflate this redynamesh and give it a bit of clay, just to redefine that volume here. And you'll see that every time that I redynamesh, I lose a bit of the definition that I had. But again, that's part of the idea as well, to not get attached to a specific panel or a specific volume at this stage. I think that's kind of like a healthy thing, a healthy habit, just to don't get attached to your designs. And again, especially if I would have stayed with the original version by now, I mean, we could have already started adding some alphas and details and stuff like that, but it wouldn't make, I don't know, a very interesting design at the end. So I prefer this idea of, you know, spending more time in this stage than in the next one, which is once you figure all of this out, once you figure out the design and how the panels work and the main shapes, primary and secondary, then doing the details and doing the alphas it's really easy. Again, that's something that I always say, as well as when you're working with more organic stuff, it's just very easy to do that, to add details and add alphas, and that's what ZBrush is so good for. So I prefer to spend my time in this process, designing and making sure that the actual design is sound, it's working, that in the other stage, which is just detailing, and you can have as many details and as many high frequency details, super detailed stuff, but if the primary shapes, the forms are not working, then the design sort of falls apart. It's kind of like treating this as a, you know, pre-production and all that. There's actually a really nice quote from, I think it's from Abraham Lincoln, that says, I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's, if I had to chop down a tree, no, if I had, I think it's if I have 6 hours or 9 hours to chop down a tree, I would spend the first 6 sharpening the axe, something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but you get the idea. It's like the same thing applies for this process. Is if I have 10 hours to come up with a concept or a mecha design, I'll spend more than 70% at this stage just making sure that the volumes and the forms are right before I spend 20% or 30% just doing details, because again, once you figure out this part, then the rest is pretty simple. That's just my view. All right, this area needs a bit of work. All right, let me see. Thanks, Giba. Yeah, I think it's you know, the design process is very interesting to see it evolve. Definitely. Hey, West 3D Art, how's it going? Shape Pablo, I'm polypainting a model right now. I use layers, and polypainting seems to be a little problematic with them. Do you have any workflow around that? With polypaint and layers, it's a bit tricky. Just make sure that you're not painting with material, because if you have material enabled, it could cause a problem. Do you like to stay within one subtool as much as you can? Yeah, while I'm designing, yes, but then it's going to be much easier to refine things if you have things split into multiple subtools. Right now I have just the head. If I go into solo mode, I have just the head, the body, and some reference here that I'm using to, you know, to refine these areas, but that's all I have in terms of subtools. But yeah, once I probably maybe, I don't know, maybe not in this case, because I want to keep it, you know, simple and don't spend too much time on this concept. But yeah, probably if I were to just refine this further and make it look really sharp and nice, and even if it's just a sketch without retopology or anything, a Dynamesh, but I wanted to make it really neat and all the crevices connecting and all that, probably yes, probably I would just split this into different parts and connect them. But I think for this, we'll see how we go. I think just looking at it from this angle as well, I think this is not necessarily working, this line here. So just because it creates that idea of the sad eyes, I'm just gonna connect these together. Yeah, I think that's better. I'm not a huge fan of this area at the bottom, like the jawline. I think I'm gonna change that before moving forward. So let's just push this down. Okay, so it's a bit thicker, and I think I'm just gonna push this in. We can fill in some of these areas later with some tubes or some cables or something like that. I think that would be cool. Same here maybe. Still don't know. This area could be something different. It needs some refinement, but at least this area here would look like the jawline looks a bit more interesting, more defined. Let's go into solo mode. It's kind of like a tube, really. It's rounded. Yeah, I don't mind this. All right. I think it's still pretty sketchy, but looking much better. What ZBrush should I get? Not sure that what question that is. Maybe if you're referring to ZBrush, ZBrush Core, between ZBrush Core and ZBrush, they're just two different versions. ZBrush Core is pretty streamlined, pretty simple. Now it has Sculptris Pro, which is amazing. It's an amazing feature, but yeah, they're different. One is kind of like an entry level. The other version is this full-on version that it's more. It's more for production. The ZBrush Core can also be used in production, at least for maybe 3D printable stuff is pretty good. But yeah, I don't know if that's your question, but yeah, if you get ZBrush, or if you're referring to the different versions, just get the latest version, obviously. Hopefully that's the question. Do you ever turn off the blur in Dynamesh? I rarely do, and I don't change the so I leave the blur as it is, and the polish and project, those are things that I change sometimes. At this stage, if I use project and I start like going up in resolution, it's gonna take ages, and because I use Dynamesh as a very quick to iterate and push things and redesign, I don't want to have to worry too much about that, and I just keep it very simple, really. Those are very specific things. Like for instance, if I have groups, I will enable groups when I'm dynameshing, so that then I can utilize something like polish by groups, and then create some panels. I'll show you that technique later. I'm pretty sure it would be something cool to show. Do you have any reference? Yeah, we did have a reference. I don't have it open. Let me see if I have it here. It's different now from what we have now. here we have it. So let me bring it. So this is pure ref. So this is a this is the original concept. You can just try to match it. That'll be good. So this is the original concept. We did it as well with a C-sketch in ZBrush. That's at the beginning of last session. And as you can see, it has some of the details that the original had, like this lens or whatever this is, but it's super loose. It's just a thumbnail, really. So I was using that as a reference. That's my reference. But yeah, and of course, yes, you can look at different hard surface stuff to get ideas, but that's my reference for now. También utilizas booleans solo para escultura. El renderman is asking if I also use booleans or just a sculpture. So booleans is something that I would use later, of course, for detailing. That would be definitely one way to go about it, and I quite like the booleans in ZBrush. How to get the GoZ plugin Maya and Max? No idea. You can just go to the Pixology download center and try that. You have to have obviously Maya and Max for that to work. But yeah, I don't use that plugin, so don't know really. When I use C-model brush after pushing spacebar in polygon mode, the menu jumps on top of the page. Can see 3 lines only. There's a way to fix it. 3 line, not sure what that means. So if you use the C-model brush, you should get a menu depending on which element of the sculpture you selected or you hover over. Not sure what that means. The menu jumps on top of the page. What page? Sorry, I'm not entirely sure what that means. All right, so for instance, let's see. I have a set of polygroups here. I'm just gonna give it a single polygroup, and I'm gonna increase the resolution quite a bit. I'm gonna leave the blur as it is. If I use polish, that's gonna give me kind of like a clay polish. So I'm gonna click on polish, click and drag, and you see that polish effect with more resolution. It sort of sharpens some of these borders, which is kind of cool. All right, so let's go ahead and refine some of these connections, so these areas here. So we can place some of these details a bit better later on. But again, this is just clay brush, nothing else. Oops, just keep using the polish. All right. So yeah, I'm gonna try to move it along and do this a little bit faster because I can spend a lot of time here. So let's go ahead and start sharpening some of these, and I'll show you a technique, which is pretty cool, in a second. I'm gonna go ahead and polish this a bit. Again, it's gonna be a quick pass just to polish. So I'm gonna bring in my clay polish brush, and with the clay polish brush you can also use the Alt key. So in these areas, rather than just pushing things up, if you hold the Alt key, it's gonna try to bring them up closer to the surface. So that's something really, really handy. So I use that in combination with the standard effect of the polish H brush, smooth brushes, and then just flattening this in. Again, this is a very quick pass. What I'm doing is just using the H polish again and the smooth brush just to try to sharpen things a bit. Because we have those, let's say, the borders defined with the damp center brush, like in this case, it needs a bit more. because we have those defined with the damp standard brush, then it's gonna be very easy for the edge polish to refine those. And I'll show you what I mean in a second. All right, back to the edge polish. So you see here, it is kind of like sharp, but not enough. But because I have those indications of the edges, I can use the edge polish and then hold Control, and it sort of like sticks to that plane. Whoops. Without going over, and that's, you know, also a matter of varying the size of the brush, and use that in combination with the smooth brush. So you see this area already, although it's still pretty sketchy, it looks a little bit more polished than the rest. So I'm gonna do a quick pass on this, just refining all of these parts, and then I'm gonna start showing you some cool techniques to further refine and improve the design. Or maybe the design not, but just further refine these hard surface stuff. And it's something that works for everything really, but you know, for these hard surface models, it's pretty cool. Just gonna add a bit more volume so that I can polish it faster. Dynamesh. Just keep polish on. Oops. All right. So edge polish now. There we go. And you can also use the masking brushes with edge polish. So if you want to protect an area, let's say like this, you just mask and then use the edge polish to really push this hard, but protecting that area that you want. And that's just another way to very quickly start polishing. So just max that area, and I can push this quite hard using the edge polish. And then here from the top, do the same thing. All right, with that mask. But that's essentially what this process is, really. Masking areas, protecting areas that you want to maintain, or that you don't want to affect with the edge polish. And again, there's many different ways to approach this. I could also use the clipping brushes, for example, or separating things to pieces and using the trim brushes and that sort of thing. But this allows me to just keep designing things as I go. So if I don't like that, I don't have to, recreate an entire piece. I can just do it and redynamesh and polish again. So this becomes a very, very organic process. Although I'm sort of like polishing, I can still change the sketch. So you see me here adding a bit more volume in this area that I needed, and then I can just go ahead and smooth that and use the edge polish to flatten that again. All right, let's go ahead and polish these other areas a little bit more. And here, before I do this, I'm gonna refine the kind of like the pattern of this edge, just to make something interesting. Yeah, something like that would work, I think. All right. I'm gonna bring in the clay brush to add just a tiny bit more volume there before I flatten this area. All right, and edge polish. And this is also the advantage of using a Wacom. You know, you can have, or any tablet really that has pressure. I just think Wacoms are probably the best tools. But yeah, just having the ability to use pressure when you're polishing, it really helps. So I'm gonna use the edge polish here, and then I'm gonna cut through this again. All right, let me see the chat. Just wanted to say that the ZBrush compositor is super neato. Can get some interesting result with very quickly. Thanks so much. Glad you like it. Yeah, it's a really cool tool that allows you to, like you said, get things going very quickly. And I don't know if you saw it, but I just recently released a new guide and a new tutorial in the ZBrush Guides website that it's about creating patches with the ZBrush compositor. So I found that technique to be, you know, very interesting, a more practical approach rather than just rendering, let's say, with the compositor. You can actually create some very cool stuff directly within ZBrush, and because you have the ability to use any process, you can just go ahead and do whatever you feel comfortable with in ZBrush, and then send it to the compositor, and then just produce a bunch of passes and textures or PBR textures to complete the rendering somewhere else, or just to create assets, which is really what the tutorial is about. Is just how to create those textures for PBR. So yeah, if you haven't seen it, check it out, because I think it's a pretty cool technique, especially for the, you know, if you're doing something that, if you're into like game art and that sort of thing, it will probably be something very useful. I'm gonna remove polish, increase the resolution even more. Let's go ahead and remove the blur just for the time being. Actually, the blur is something that I don't really change much. Let's just leave it. Run the Dynamesh. And then instead of using the polish here, I can just do a clay polish, and it would be pretty much the same thing. But before I do that, I just want to refine some of these edges that I sort of changed again. All right, Dynamesh, clay polish, clear the mask, and then we can start refining this again. So here we can put some kind of cylindrical device, like a lens again, or a couple of lenses here. All right. So I constantly do this, and every time that I have to redynamesh for some reason, because I changed the topology or changed the proportions, I have to go back and redefine those edges just to maintain them clean, neat and clean. But yeah, just using the, you know, all of this area looks already pretty polished, and of course the panels are not very well defined just yet, but I'm just polishing the surface, and then I'm gonna go ahead and refine those panels a bit more, or like the difference between the panels. And I'm gonna show you a couple of cool techniques about that. Hopefully we have time. Yeah, we have plenty of time. Hopefully we get to that point. So in this instance, I'm going to try to add a bit more volume before I polish. Right, so it's a little bit straighter there, and use the H polish. All right, I think that's better. And not everything has to be like super sharp. Like, I'm actually not a huge fan of these super sharp edges. We can bevel them a little bit just by smoothing them later on, but that's again something that will come after this stage when I'm refining these bits. Let me see if I can answer anything else while I'm doing this, because it's pretty repetitive. Is there a way to bake fiber mesh on a plane and other type of meshes? Absolutely. There is at least 2 or 3. I would say 2, just because the third one might not be relevant for what you just asked. But there is a couple of tutorials in the ZBrush Guides website. So if you go to the ZBrush Guides, then just filter by fiber mesh or hair or fair effects in the tutorials page, and yeah, I just go over like how to do that with the fiber mesh stuff. There's 2. There's one for like more stylized, and another one that is slightly more realistic. So you can create hair cards and all that, and I cover that in the tutorial. So make sure you check that out. Okay, this area right here at the bottom is the one that I didn't pay too much attention, so I might have to come back and refine this later, the design at least. Trying to stay away from doing these little details. Every time that I see some like an area that I think, oh, this could have like a little bolt or something, I tend to just do it, and it's like, no, let's stick with the main shapes. That's what I was doing there. So just gonna add volume here before I polish it. And I think I need to sort of define this a bit better. Before I can polish it, because in some areas it makes sense, but some other areas that are like a little bit, you know, like this area right here, it's not very well defined how it sort of intersects with the neck, or how it locks into the neck. So let's just do that. Or we can take the body as well. Oops. Because I haven't actually worked on the body as much, and I don't think I will really. I'm gonna do a quick polish pass on the body later on, but the focus would be the head anyway, or for the techniques that I wanted to show you. Although so far it's pretty straightforward, right? It's just sculpting brushes and polishing brushes. All right, let's select the H polish again. And just refine this. Then for some of these edges that look a little bit wobbly, a great tool for that would be the pinch brush, and that's the one that I'm going to use after I redefine the panels, or like the crevices between the panels. I will use that brush, and I'll show you a pretty cool way to refine that. So I think I need to do this kind of like a modular way so that it can, like if this guy had a jaw or like a mouth, it could open somehow. Again, I don't want to make this a helmet, so there's no humanoid character or anything inside it. It's just a mecha, a robot. But right now it looks kind of like a suit, so that's part of the idea of changing the shapes quite a bit, just to make sure that it's not following the structure of a humanoid. Oh no. Oof. It almost crashed there. Maybe I should do a quick save. I haven't done that. I'll do that in a second and check the chat again. All right, quick save. Let's see. Oh, I got a congratulation from Restream. 100 message today. That's awesome. Thanks, guys. Do you think this robot can be done in MOI 3D? Not sure what that is. MOI 3D. I think I haven't heard of that. What PC are you rocking right now? I need to upgrade to a more powerful CPU and also need some more RAM, which is really demanding on those areas. So I have a Threadripper 16 core, 32 threads, and it runs pretty smoothly with ZBrush and most things. Rendering as well is pretty fast. I also have, although it's not relevant for ZBrush, I also have an RTX 2080, not the Ti, just the cheap one from the range, but that's an amazing card as well. So I render in any software that allows me to do GPU is super fast. But if you want to see like the exact specs that I use for my computer, that's also in the ZBrush guides as well. There's a tutorial called 3D work PC or 3D work PC configuration. I can't remember, but it's in there. You can just search for reference guides, or if you go to the tutorials page in the ZBrush guides, there's various different ways to filter the tutorials that I have in there. So just go and filter by by what you think is it's related to what you're looking for, and I think you can find it. That's if you want to have a specific idea of what I have, because I shared all that with the list, or the part list, and I think it works really nice, at least for the type of work that I do. I don't do much like simulations and stuff like that, so I'm just redefining this area because, again, I didn't pay too much attention to certain areas here. So I'm just trying to figure these ones out very quickly so that I can polish them. All right. And again, this at the back, if I'm gonna do just a front render, like from the front, then you won't see most of these things. So I'm not too worried about it. All right, I'm gonna use the clay brush again, sorry, the edge polish with a large brush, and just redefine this. but pretty quick. And I use the H polish, and then as soon as I polish something, then I go with a smooth brush and a strong smooth brush, or putting a lot of pressure, and then just refine that area. This one looks rubbish, so I'm gonna use the clay brush, just refine these volumes here, so that I can polish it properly, because it wasn't good. All right, H polish. I think I'm in a relatively good place now to start defining these with a few other techniques, so that it's not the same thing the entire stream. Again, because like I've mentioned, I could spend a lot of time that in this stage, and it's just gonna be boring to watch. So I think I'm in a good place to, or in a good stage, just in terms of design, to start adding start using a different techniques, a few different techniques to polish and refine areas, but in with different tools rather than just the sculpting. Some of them are actually going to be sculpting, but not all of them. Just going to refine these bits here. And a bit of clay polish. Sorry, clay. And clay polish. Sorry, clay polish. H polish. All right. So I think it's looking all right. Let's do a quick save, and I'll do a comparison in a second. Whoa, 1 second. Kind of reminds me of Evangelio Robo things. Yeah, that'll be cool. Maybe just extend the head a little bit with the move elastic. So for an Evangelion look, we can go for something like that. That's it. Evangelion. That's the clay. I don't mind it, but yeah. Definitely something that I could try in a different stream, but this one is already at a stage that I can show you something else. Is this way of sculpting old school? I don't know how old school would that be. It's just a different workflow. Some people might like to just have this at a very sketchy level, like I have the body, for example, and not polish it as much, and then start cutting into pieces and use the retopology brush and that sort of thing. So but yeah, old school sculpting would require a piece of marble and hammer and chisels, but it's the same thing. I mean, the principle would be slightly the same. I think someone asked me this a while ago, like we're talking about whether or not it's kind of like cheating, like if you compare it with the masters, the old masters and all that. And I just think it's like the technology is obviously different, and I'm sure if they had ZBrush at their disposal, they will be creating amazing stuff as well, and they will be using it. Old school sculpting, yeah, it's me, Mono. Hello, how much you give out? Thank you very much. I'm really glad that you like it and that you like the content. Awesome. Love experimenting with the Monster IMM brush pack. Cool, awesome stuff. Yeah, there's some pretty creepy stuff that I mean, it's a pack that we did in combination with other artists, and Pavlovich is there. So like some of the stuff that Pavlovich did for the Michael Pavlovich did for the pack are pretty weird, but pretty awesome. And Ashley also is there. Ashley A. Adams. So pretty weird stuff in that pack, but I love it. For 3D printing, use orthographic or perspective. I find that one print my models, they look a little bit off, like the perspective is a little too much. Yeah, I really don't think about those things. To be honest, I just sculpt in the way that I do, or that I try to that I get something that it looks good to me, and I change between perspective on and off constantly, and change the camera as well. But if you want a more realistic representation of what the proportions are and the distortion on the camera, I would use something else, like another application, just to double check before. But yeah, I don't worry too much about those things, to be honest. If it doesn't work, I'll just print it again. I saw the ZBrush guide, but the website is quite slow. It wasn't slow for me. So maybe it's your internet connection. Don't know. Can you explain the ZBrush compositor in short? Not right now, because that would take the rest of the stream, and I wanna show you guys some of the stuff here. But there are at least 3 or 4 guides in the ZBrush guides. There is one introduction series, and it explains everything in detail as well. So if you go to the ZBrush guides, it's going to be pretty easy to find in there, if you want to have a look at that in more depth. But essentially what it is allows you to send whatever you have on the canvas, doesn't matter what it is, could be fiber mesh, could be nano mesh, anything that you want in ZBrush, anything that you can do within ZBrush, and then just create a you click one button and it sends it to Substance Painter without the need of UVs or anything like that. It creates a displacement plane, so that's what you see. It's kind of like a fake version of the 3D, but you can use all the tools in Substance Painter and Marmoset as well. Cool. Awesome. All right, so let's do something different for this guy, or at least a different polishing technique. So what I'm going to do is just create my usual folder. I'm going to duplicate this, select the original, and I'm going to create my OR folder. So just to keep the original. And for this head, I'm going to bring in a chisel brush. So the chisel brushes are awesome. This one, for example, the chisel brush, it has a bunch of these VDMs. So these are VDMs that push the geometry. So these ones are really cool to define very controlled set of lines. So for instance, maybe this one, I'll show you what this does. Oops, there we go. So you get this sort of like double paneling effect very quickly within the sketch. So maybe this one, it gives you this type of effect, which is awesome. I'm probably need to increase the resolution, although it's pretty high, but you know, we can do more. So I'm gonna increase the resolution, Dynamesh. Okay, and now we have more resolution to play with, and we can use these tools to, you know, create things like that. So this is pretty cool. Like if you want to do, oops, some indentations like this, and I might do this as well, you know, and that already makes it look more interesting, just to break things apart, like for details. But I'm gonna use a few of these brushes to just sharpen those details, at least the crevices. So let's see, this one is too much, maybe this one. Yeah, so this one is a pretty cool one that it will give you this paneling effect straight away. So I'm gonna use that in a few spots. But I'm also, before I do anything else, I'm gonna store a morph target, and then I can start doing this a bit more control. And the reason I store the morph target is so that it maintains the what's the name, the same level of the surface. So when I'm doing this, I can connect. Let me undo that, because I think this part needs, it's fine. I just have a very small brush. Sorry, a very large brush. I think maybe this is too much. I don't want it to be that sharp. I'm gonna use the simple one. Hang on, I'm just trying to think if I should use either or. Maybe this one, it's not as deep. Yeah, I'm gonna use that one. So what I was saying is, if I don't have a morph target, let me actually show you what I mean. So I'm gonna delete my morph target. So if I use my chisel brush and I go like this, and then I go like this on top, you'll see that it's sort of like doubles up in elevation. Basically, it's just pushing this at, let's say, 50%, and then going over, it adds other 50%. So it gets, this area right here will have like 100%, right? So, and yeah, that is not ideal for what I'm trying to do. So if I undo that, and if I store a morph target before I start, I can do this, and then I can just go over it, and it will maintain the same distance. It also allows me to do one line here, and then click at the end, and then continue from there. So that's that allows me to keep that paneling effect sort of like very consistent. So that's why I stored a morph target. All right, so I'm gonna do a quick paneling here. Again, it's not the cleanest one or the cleanest panel, but I will refine it even further. Just want to make sure that it's a bit deeper than what I have. And of course, you can also change the decimals. I'm not entirely happy with how this is producing this edge. I think this will be good for areas like this, that there's no I think the resolution is fine. It's just the way that the Dynamesh distributes the polygons, it creates that that effect that it's kind of like choppy. So I'm gonna use this one later on to add details like this type of stuff, which is fine. But instead of doing this with the chisel brush, which is still something pretty cool, I'm gonna use something else just to have more control. I'm gonna use this lash 3, which gives you, it's a sculpting brush. It doesn't have VDMs, so it won't push the geometry based on that VDM. It's just an alpha, right? So I'm gonna use this one, and I'm gonna increase my lacy radius so that I have way more control over how this line is placed. Maybe not that much. All right, so now I'm gonna use this, and you'll see, because it's not a VDM, it gives me a simpler line, a sharper edge in there. All right. So all I'm doing here really is sharpening those edges. So you'll see from the distance it looks pretty cool. So that I'm gonna do that over all the edges and maybe add a few more. I can also variate the hang on. I can also variate the size of the brush. So for instance, this one might be a bit smaller, or like the gap might be a bit smaller. There we go. So it's like using the damp standard brush really, but this one gives you more control. Or not necessarily more control, like you can also control it very nicely with the damp standard brush, but it creates a sharper line. So here in this area, I'm going to show you a pretty cool technique. So I'm just going to define an edge like so. And then here I'm going to show you something else to sort of refine that area. And the other thing that is cool about saving a morph target before working on this or refining the edges like this is that if there's something that you don't like, you can use the morph brush to go back to what you had. And actually this edge, I'm gonna do it with a larger brush so it pushes things even more, and I can define this a bit, you know, making a sharper angle in here. Also, changing the brush size as you do this is it's a pretty cool way as well to maintain a bit of a balance between the details themselves, because at the end of the day, these crevices and the difference between the panels in this hard surface creature, mecha, whatever that is, they will read as details. So having a bit of a, you know, a difference between the size and the width of these panels, or the crevices in the panels, that would also help to guide the viewer's attention as well. So this one is pretty blobby, the surface, but that's something that you can tweak later with other techniques that I'm going to show you. So I'm going to cut here, and I think here as well. So let's go from here, do a little gap, maybe from here. All right, so you see from the distance, you know, this is not going to be a close-up, so that's starting to look way more refined than before. And there's another step that we're doing, or that we will be doing, that even is going to take this even further in terms of refinement, just with the sculpting brushes, before doing anything else with other techniques. We can still rely on these sculpting brushes to get something pretty decent. Okay, so there's sometimes that it's just better to turn off the lazy mouse and then just do it like that. And again, this needs a bit of refinement, but it's all right. All right, here is where I wanted to really spend some time refining these edges, and that's gonna really help to understand how these shapes work with each other. Remember that we didn't spend too much time working on those. It was mainly at the top of the head, most of the things that I reworked. All right. And having that lazy mouse as well is a huge help, because you know, you can just drag, and then if you want a sharper line, instead of continue, you just go back and reset sort of like the angle, or like change the angle, and you can keep doing this as many times as you need, and it just really helps with the refinement of that edge. I'm gonna go into solo mode really quick here just to add a line here. All right. Cool. So in this case, I think I'm not gonna cut this panel. I'm just gonna leave it as it is. You could also use this /3 with the Alt key to just create these crevices. So you can further refine some, you know, edges like this. I could potentially do that here. Right? And then just use the smooth brush to soften it a bit, and that's just gonna sharpen that. And then you can go with the edge polish and redefine that, or re-polish that surface. So that's another good use for the /3. It's a really powerful brush. Okay, so you see very quick, I'm gonna show you the difference. So I'm gonna have the new one on this side. Oh, not the new one, the most recent one. And I'm gonna select the old one, or the original, on this other side. So the main shapes, the primary shapes are still there, but the refinement of the edge, so you see here at the top, is, you know, definitely much well refined than the other one, and that's just using those lines to refine those panels. And I'm gonna go again over certain areas and do that even more, just as in setting up the crevices, or sharpen those crevices. And there is an extra step, like I said, that we haven't done to further even refine those, because there might be some edges that look a little bit wobbly or not as straight. So that's part of the next step. Let me see the chat. If I will use that model for a video game, how do I retopple it? Just there's many ways to do that. I've covered that in the past as well. There's some ZBrush guides as well about that. Not specific about retopologizing hard surface, but there's many ways to retopologize it. You can just take this sketch and you can decimate it, take it out of ZBrush, and do it in your preferred application. I personally do it within ZBrush. It's just faster, using the C-sphere. Let me see how we time. So we have about half an hour. I can show you. I wanted to show you some other things, and I will show you some other techniques. Just before move forward, I just saw this that I wanna refine. Hang on, just a line in there. Yeah, so there's a few things that I want to show you in terms of techniques to keep polishing these before thinking about retopology and all that. But just because the question has come up a few times, I'm just going to show you that in a second. Let me just read the chat. You usually do not retopologize in ZBrush. I would recommend you identify what program you want. Yeah, so again, there's many different ways. As the what is it? Kazan. DAFUKSN is saying there's different ways to go about it. What brush is this? Just join the one that cuts through the model. That's the /3. I think that's the one that you were referring to. Yep. He uses C Modeler 2 or just traditional brushes with lazy mouse or hard surface. Again, there's many ways to do it. I'm going to show you, just for the sake of answering some of those questions that have come up in the chat, a few different ways, right? So I'm going to clone this, and now I have a clean, well, just this subtool by itself. So retopologizing in ZBrush is extremely easy once you get the hang of it, and for me it's really easy. Like, I already feel very comfortable with it, so it's very similar, very easy for me to retopologize, but you can do it in a different application. If you want to do it in a different application that doesn't allow you to have these many polygons, what you can do is go to the C plugin, go to the decimation master, and then you can just let's say hit any of these presets. Maybe 35,000 would be pretty good. So it maintains the volumes really well, but whoops, still doing it. We just wait until the decimation master does it. It just simplifies the mesh quite a bit while maintaining the volumes. send to whatever other application you want, and then you can do the retopology in there. So you don't have to send like millions of polygons, whatever Dynamesh object you're using. What kind of use have that model in that phase? I'm not sure what you mean. What kind of use the current model have in what phase? Maybe if you're referring to why I'm doing this instead of cleaner topology, is that the question? Not sure. Well, if it is, it's because I'm designing it, right? I'm doing designing 3D. I'm sketching in 3D. So just working on a perfect topology from the beginning, it will be quite restrictive in the way that I explore the shapes of the design. That's mainly why. And it's because it's also a concept, so it's much faster to do this than do a perfect topology and then send it to the director or the or the client and say, like, you know what, change this completely, and then you have to do the retopology, which is a tedious and longer process. Or for me at least, it's a bit more tedious, but it's definitely a longer process than just sketching this way before you sort of lock in the design. All right, so it's just taking a little while to do this. How did you find the transfer to ZBrush 2019 to 2020? Was there much change? Yeah, a lot of different changes. I actually rearranged my UI to sort of suit the new ZBrush 2020. And just 1 second, it's per 1 second. Oh damn! It's like it's raining really heavily now outside, and I have the washing out. Anyway, so see, this is the decimation master. So it simplifies this, and now I have 35,000 polygons in this model compared to this one that has 2 million. But the volumes are exactly the same. I'm just switching between the two. It's pretty much the same. So I would just take this one, the one that is obviously less heavy, send it to whatever application, and do the retopology there. Now within ZBrush, you can also use, I'm going to append a C-sphere, select the C-sphere, and actually I'm going to scale this down. Oops. Scale it down. Just move it up. I can go to the topology, edit topology, get out of solo mode so that I can see what I'm doing, and then with this tool, just using the C-sphere, you can just start clicking and retopologizing. That's all there is to it. So I'm just clicking to set up the quads. You know, this is like really easy. You can use the move brush to, sorry, the move tool to just reset this, and it's going to snap to the surface. So you don't have to do anything complicated. You don't have to do any setup or anything. Just drag in a C-sphere and keep going. This is actually the technique that I teach in my course in the Extra Mile, just because for me is the easiest one, and in the workflow that I teach in the course, it's probably the best way to generate a clean topology. And it's so simple once you get the hang of it, once you sort of understand the tools and what they do, where sometimes it gives you some little errors and some little hiccups, but they're very easy to manipulate. So that's just a quick topology in ZBrush. And let's say for this part, again, it's not perfect. I didn't really consider this shape in here, but then you can simply go to the adaptive skin. I'm going to set the Dynamesh to 0 so that it doesn't Dynamesh this, and I'm going to click on preview, go in solo, and also maybe density 1. That's exactly what I have, and if I'm happy with this part, I'm going to make adaptive skin. Now it creates a separate tool that I can copy and paste it in my working file. Right? If I go out of solo mode, now I have this piece, and then I can combine that with the C modeler, polygroup all, and I can extrude this, right? And I can also enable dynamic, so that I can see more of it, like a smoother version, but this is just a clean topology. I can also maybe add a loop in here, so just using the tools with the C modeler sharpen certain things, right? So hopefully that answers the question. It's a pretty simple way to go about it, and you know, once you get used to the tools, it's extremely simple. I don't mind that actually, but I'll show you another technique. So that's one way to go about that. You can also use the the topology brush. So you can go to the topology brush. Where is the topology brush? I'm gonna click T. Here we go. Topology brush, and this is a similar way to do it for more organic stuff. I use it all the time. So you draw a couple of lines, right, or a few lines. I'm just doing similar shapes, and then you start crossing those lines, and ZBrush is going to create topology. Whoops, let me undo a couple more, and we'll start doing topology based on those cuts. Right, and then once you're happy, you click outside the model. Whoops, maybe with a larger brush size. And that's it. You have a new piece of topology that it looks pretty decent, similar to what I just did before. I can split on mask points, and now I can go into solo mode, and that's your piece. And then of course you can go ahead and refine this even further with the C modeler. Right? You know, you can do more panels once you have this. You can insert region, extrude that. Anyway, I'm just moving away from the actual stream, but I just wanted to give you that idea that you can approach it in many different ways, whatever is more comfortable for you, or at least you're more familiar with. Like I said, you can do that outside of ZBrush. I personally do it in ZBrush because it's really easy, and that technique that I show you is what I personally use all the time, and that's why it's what I teach in my course, because I believe it's the fastest way. If you want more precision in certain things, and you think that certain tools outside of ZBrush give you more control, you can also do that. Since the robot will have different materials, how will you eventually split the various panels so that they can assign different materials? Again, that depends on the process. If this is going to be just a concept, I can just literally paint the different colors and paint different materials, and then in a rendering engine I just attach or assign materials per color vertex, or the materials that come from the materials in ZBrush. Otherwise I'll just split it into parts as well. Again, different approaches in that sense. Does that work in the same as live surface? I'm not sure what that live surface means. Yeah, there's a lot of things in ZBrush that if you're not aware of, because maybe you don't need it. You're used to other stuff. You don't need to explore certain things. You might be like unaware of. It's definitely it's a nice surprise. I myself find sometimes things that I go like, whoa, I didn't know that this was a thing, and I've been doing it like a more complicated approach for a long time, and I just use a different one. I mean, I find something and it's like, oh yeah, this is definitely much easier to do. So yeah, ZBrush still surprises me. All right, I'm just going to refine some of these areas here that I didn't do before moving forward, and I'll show you other techniques. Hopefully we're gonna have time. But this is a project that could drag for a long time, so I'm gonna try to do as much as I can here, and then in the next stream probably hopefully we'll get to add some details. I didn't get that one right. I'm gonna do it again. Maybe starting from here. And remember that I still have the morph target, so I can go back and tweak this one quite a bit. If there is a line that I don't like. Didn't work properly here, so I'm gonna do it again. All right, that's better. I'm gonna increase my brush size so that it's like a bit larger here, the gap. And I'm gonna go, oh, there's another thing that you can use. Let me just show you. So if you do a line, like a straight line like this, or it doesn't have to be straight, but just a line that works in a single motion. Once you do it, before you do anything else, you can press the number 1 in your keyboard, and that's gonna repeat the latest action. So it's just gonna take that and push it even further, right? And that's just using the number 1 in your keyboard. I'll repeat it here so you can see. So that line in here, I wanted to make it a bit sharper. Oops, I moved the camera. So it's just gonna repeat whatever the last action was, whether it's a camera movement or a stroke. So that stroke, then press 1, and it's just gonna sharpen it. That's another tool that I use sometimes when I'm doing this type of things. Maybe a smaller brush size, and then let's go ahead and refine these ones here. And I know this bit is not particularly interesting to watch, but is what is going to allow us to work in the rest, you know, with more definition at least. All right, let's do a couple more here at the back, and then I'll show you. I'll do a few of these kind of like between this stream and the next one, so that you don't have to watch this same repetitive thing, and then I'll just show you something else, like another couple of techniques or tricks. All right, so still pretty sketchy, but it looks more defined if you look at it from the distance, right? All right, I'm going to use the the edge polish to flatten this a bit more. Again, this is something that I didn't pay too much attention to. All right, let's see how this looks from the distance. So those kind of like major cuts are like the first pass, like just defining the big ones, and then we can use the damp standard brush to refine and add smaller ones. You can use the same brush again, but I find the damp standard brush to be quite useful. Maybe we can increase the radius and do this type of thing. So we can go like this, like that, and then number 1, just to again repeat the same action. So that those sort of things, just connecting lines or inside lines between the panels, like this area right here, that could have an indentation there, and press 1, I don't know if it did it, but it looks alright like this. Right, so that sort of thing. Now I'm going to show you something else, or a different technique, I guess, to generate this, the idea of these panels. I think I said that I was going to show you here, so let's just do that. I'm going to smooth this a bit. So you can go ahead and actually, before I show you that, just so that I don't lose what I have here in terms of the my morph brush, I'm going to use the pinch brush. I'm going to delete morph target, and I'm going to save another one. Right, and now with the pinch brush, that's how I can refine the distance between these panels. So I'll just go like this and sort of bring them closer together. So as I bring this closer together, I'm also refining the sharpness of the angles and the corners, as you can see here. And that's just really a really handy tool, and you can use that not only for the difference between the panels, for like the crevices. You can also use them for, let's say, this area here. You can refine those edges very quickly with the pinch brush. So that's the extra pass that I was talking about, that you can use just to refine those, especially the corners of this paneling effect. All right, for example, here. This area that I didn't do much, as in didn't went with a very strong crevice, is also a good idea to sharpen those with the pinch brush. And like I said, it could be also just the edges. It doesn't have to be a crevice. So just like these areas there, or here, it's like manually creasing the edges in a way. And that's why I wasn't too worried about like some of these edges being too wobbly. All right, so that's another technique, or another way that you can polish that surface. Just want to refine this a bit. But you see that I can go back and forth between the original set of brushes that I started using and the more refined, you know, like the edge polish and all that, to refine very quickly, because this is still a sketch. So I can still change the design quite a bit if I want to. But again, I'm gonna try to restrain myself and not gonna do that, so that we can move forward. All right, so that was another technique. I will probably use the same thing at the back just to tighten things up. But I'm going to show you something else that is really helpful at this stage, that we don't have a clean topology. We can still work on the sketch. Let's see. That replay last is in the menu. I changed my wand hotkey to my standard brush. That's replay. Yeah, the replay last, that's in the stroke palette, I think. If you go to the stroke palette, modifiers, repeat last. So it's set to 1. You can just, yeah, you can click on this or assign a different button in the stroke palette for that repeat last. Why you didn't use the chill brushes for that part? Just because it is the the resolution wasn't the best. I would use the chisel brush for some areas. Let's use the chisel brush. Yeah, why not? I think this one will be pretty cool. So I'm gonna create some lines in here. So that's chisel brush, still useful. Just wanted to show you something else. I might use the same thing, something like around there. Oh, still have my morph activated. Maybe this is too large, so I'm gonna do one like this. It's just that the chisel brush actually uses a VDM. But again, this is kind of like getting into the detailing territory. So I might not do that just yet, but yeah, you can totally use that. I definitely want to use this later, maybe in the next stream, but that's why I didn't use it. So the next technique that I wanted to show you is, so for example, let's say these little edges are bothering me, so I'm going to smooth them out. Yeah, and then I'm going to use the edge polish to sharpen this. All right, so the next technique that I want to show you is, for example, in this area, you can go ahead and mask specific areas. So I want to use the mask lasso, and I'm going to mask this like so, right? Because I'm using the mask lasso, you have to take into account that it does it based on the camera. So there might be some, or they should be, in this case, some masked areas at the back. So I'm going to invert the mask them out, so that I make sure that only this area is masked. And then I'm going to go ahead and invert that mask, enable polyframe. I'm going to turn off the line just so you can see better. And I'm going to hold Control and W to assign a polygroup. So now I have a different polygroup. Might actually change the color so that it's more visible, right? And if I get closer, these jagged edges are pretty bad, as in not useful for what I want to do, which is kind of like create an indentation and push things in there. So you can use, actually you could have skipped a step, but I'll show you later. So you can use, where is it? I think it's not necessarily I'm just like talking nonsense right now, I know. So I'm just thinking what would be the best way to show you. So you can use the polish by groups, but that might also polish some of the other areas. So if I use polish by groups, see, it polishes the groups nicely, but it also polishes a few other areas as well. So I don't want to do that. So instead, what you can do is, this is another thing that comes with ZBrush. So you can go to the brushes, and you can go to the smooth brushes, and this comes with ZBrush, and there is one called the smooth groups. This one here, smooth groups. Click OK. So this brush, what it does is pretty much that polish by groups, but controlled in a single brush. So now if I hold the Shift key, I can go ahead and smooth this quite easily and clean up those edges quite a bit just with the brush. So that's super cool, right? Because I don't have to, I can do it locally basically, or localize in a specific area. I don't have to do the polish or the smooth groups with the slider. And then once I'm happy with that, I'm going to change to another brush, another smooth brush. Right, so that's what I have here, and I'm happy with this sort of shape. And then what we can do is select that again. So Control and Shift to select it. I'm going to mask this, invert the selection. I'm going to invert the mask, and now I have these areas unmasked. And you can bring in the gizmo, for example, or you can use the, in this case, I like to use the good old transpose line, but you can use the gizmo. I'm going to show you the transpose line and then another detail with the gizmo. So if I hold Control and click on the middle with the move brush, it's just going to extrude this inwards. So I can hold Control, click, right, and I'm going to hold Shift without letting go, and that's going to snap to the angle of the transpose line, right? So I'm going to push this in quite a bit, right? And if you want, of course, you can, oops, you can use the transpose line to reposition these. You can do the same thing with the gizmo. I'll show you. Clear that, turn this off, and now you see we have this very sharp area as well. But because this also has a polygroup, we can just isolate it, right? Mask it, invert the mask, and then we can use something like the edge polish to just polish that area. So again, this is just another way that you can go about this. There's many ways to approach the same thing in ZBrush. That's the great part of it, and that's why there are many different artists using different workflows. And I think that's one of the great things about our ZBrush community, right? That most people like to share their workflows, and you can get tips from different artists as well to add to your own workflow and ultimately come up with your own ideas. All right, so for instance, in this area here, I want to add a similar indentation, so we can go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going to repeat the same process using the gizmo. All right, and actually I want to show you something else. So before I just masked this area, gave it a polygroup, then use the smooth groups to simplify this, and then the process, right? The one that I just showed you. But you can actually use a different tool. Let me just refine the mask a bit. I think I want to actually have it so that it takes a bit of the edge here. All right, so I'm just going to show you how to skip a step. So if you go to the geometry palette and then open up the edge loop sub palette or sub tab, you have a tool here called the edge loop mask border. So once you have the border or the area that you want masked, you can click on this edge loop mask border, and it's going to give you a very smooth border. So if I get closer here, so you can see the effect. I'm going to turn on the lines so you see exactly what this does. So when I click on this, and you see the edge is pretty smooth, right, straight away, and it gives you that mask as well. So I'm going to clear that mask. So it's kind of like skipping one of those steps. You don't have to manually clean those edges, but again, if you wanted to, you can use the smooth groups to go in and smooth this out. All right, in this case I'm going to use the move brush with the AccuCurve to just sharpen things a bit, very subtly. You can actually use the notch brush for this, so that I can sharp this idea of this, I don't know, this little gap, vent or whatever. And these are the type of things that you can also do with VDMs and alphas and that sort of thing. But this is another technique, right? So I'm gonna isolate, Control Shift and click, mask this area, invert the mask. Sorry. Invert the selection, bring back the selection, invert the mask, and I can now go ahead and bring in the gizmo. This time I'm going to use the gizmo. I'm going to center it to the unmasked areas. Whoops, I forgot to do this. This is what happens with the mask lasso. So that I have extra topology here that I don't need. All right, let me just do that again. Okay, so now that I have this centered to the unmasked areas with the gizmo, I'm going to enable this local symmetry, which is going to allow me to scale this proportionally only like locally, not in the center line or not based on the center line. And then I can go ahead and do the same technique. So I can hold Control and click and drag, and that will, you know, extrude that inwards. And then I can also use, let's say, in this case, the Z-axis to flatten all this. Right, and then I can just, you know, reposition it, move it forward. Maybe you can give it a tiny bit of a rotation. That'll be cool. Scale this up. All right, let's go ahead and clear the mask, get out of the solo. So you see, we start to define these with these tiny little details, although they're not necessarily details. They're part of the kind of like the structure of these panels. But it's very simple. The process of doing that is very simple, and we haven't even got to you know, something like booleans that we can use and that sort of thing. So we have about 3 minutes. Again, I'm gonna do some more refinement of the edges and the panels in the same way that I've been showing you, so that you don't have to sit here and watch me do the same thing, which is very repetitive. And in the next the next stream, with hopefully I'll show you the changes, and hopefully we get to do some details and some alphas and BDMs and that sort of thing, and maybe assign some materials. So let me know, guys, if you have any questions before I wrap it up today. I'm gonna check the chat. Cool. All right, so no questions so far. All right, so just to wrap it up, if there's no specific questions, I'm going to show you something else using the store morph target. So I'm going to delete current, I'm going to store a new morph target, and I'm going to use the layer brush. So layer. Yeah, feel free to ask. I mean, you can still ask, of course. I'm going to use the layer brush, and because I have the morph target selected or added, or you know, stored, I can do the same thing with the chisel brush. I can just do this and then go over, and it's going to respect the distance basically, or the depth, right? So I use this quite often to do, let's say, I'm gonna do something here, maybe just a tiny area. So no, maybe not there. Let's say there. I can use the layer brush to do a very sharp line or a very sharp edge that will stay in the same layer, or the same the same height, right? So I can go over this and do this. So this is another way to polish using the layer brush, right? And because I have the morph brush, this bit that is kind of like ugly, I can either use the smooth brush to just smooth that like so, or I can use the morph brush. Now another one is to increase the intensity quite a bit, right? And then you can go over certain areas, maybe here that already have this sort of panel effect. Hold the Alt key and smooth that out, and then create this gap, right? And of course, then you can use the morph brush to clean these areas a little bit. So if you use the morph brush, I don't have it here anymore. Oops, let's magnify. M for morph. You can get closer and refine those edges, because the stored morph target is the one that has the entire sort of like you know, initial surface. So that little thing there could be done with the layer brush and the morph target. I'm gonna do it a bit more obvious here. So let's say I do this. Maybe that's too much. Mm, 22. All right. So I do this with this layer brush, just to add kind of like a sub paneling effect here, right? But it's not as clean, right? But then I can go with my morph target, and I just recover the original shape, and I can flatten or sharpen those edges here like this. And maybe actually recover this whole edge, and now you have that little gap in there done with the layer brush. And those are like little subtle things that you can play around with. So again, that's another technique, not necessarily to add detail, but to start refining these volumes. Let me get out of solo mode. We'll do a quick render, and I'll answer any questions. So I used to technique with masking groups. It's cool, but for the masking mask, some part hardly, then simply see add brush in control. Not sure what you mean there. All right. how many faces you need to get those smooth edges. Again, that's something that I don't even pay attention to. I don't worry about that. I just keep adding and adding and adding. Million polygon count still gives me blurriness. Well, ultimately it will come down to the actual topology, right? So if you have millions of polygons, but let's say in this edge right here, you don't have the flow of the topology like that. So let's say that this is the main edge here, this one here, then you should have a topology that goes like this, quads at least that go in this way, right? If you want to refine this and get a very, very sharp edge. But because if you're using this technique and Dynameshing, Dynamesh might gives you, some quads that are like this, just because it's trying to maintain everything very proportional. So even at millions of polygons, right, the main line or the main flow of the topology could be something like that, right? So it doesn't matter what you do, it's just that's the amount of polygons that the distribution of polygons. So of course, if you want to go for something super sharp, just production ready, you definitely have to retopologize, or but for a concept sculpt like this, I would, if I get a bit of blurriness or not as sharp as I want to, I would just add more or cut it up into a piece, like a separate mesh or a separate subtool, and then add more resolution so that I can sharpen that line, that edge. All right, so I think that's it, guys. So hopefully you've liked this this stream. It's again, it's different. It's definitely something different from what I usually do. So it's kind of like fun for me to actually keep exploring these techniques that I use in different situations. And but yeah, so just as a quick recap, so in case you missed the original, here is the original mesh that was kind of like more of cliche version that we did last stream. We follow the same technique really that we've been using, but I think this new version is definitely more interesting and at least more original than this one, I think. So we're gonna stick with that and continue refining this guy in the next stream, adding some details, maybe some alphas, but yeah, we'll hopefully get to something that looks pretty cool in a couple streams. All right, so that's it for me today, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you next week. I think next week. Yep, I'll see you next week. All right, guys, take it easy.